Mount Zion, United Methodist Church. I'm your pastor, Reverend Dr. Vaughn Hayden. I'm so glad to be able to be here this morning. Last week, as you know, I was under the weather, even still a little bit this morning, but not so much that I thought it was going to be a problem. But I will keep my mask on when I'm close to people for your protection. But I've been taking medicine. Doctor gave me clearance, so we're good. But I didn't want to miss another week. I was so glad that Jen was able to fill in for me last week, preaching the sermon I prepared, and she did a wonderful job. And I'm so grateful for her and for you and for your prayers this week as we continue through the season of Lent. Continue our process and our disciplines to learn how to become like Jesus, because that's our goal, right? As Christians, we want to be like Jesus. Am I in the right place? That's our aim, right? That's what we're seeking for, because we know and understand that Jesus is the epitome of what it is to be human. I hope we understand that Jesus, we like to think of him as sometimes such otherly, but he is completely human. Yes, he's divine, but he's human, and so he shows us and teaches us how to be human in the best form, how to love others so deeply and perfectly, how to care for those that no one else cares for, how to love God with his whole heart, mind, body, and soul. Jesus is indeed who we're supposed to be like. He understands the deep truths of this world and the universe, and he shares them with others in a way that they can comprehend. He came and showed us what it is to live life to the fullest, and that's what we desire. Jesus shows us the way. Indeed, Jesus is the way. He declares it. He reveals it. Even when Jesus was baptized, remember back when he was first baptized, the Father declared from heaven, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." So, you know, Jesus is pretty cool. He's pretty good. He's a good guy we want to be like. I mean, he faced down the devil. Remember, during those temptations in the wilderness, 40 days, devil tried to come at him, and he just rebuked the devil, and the devil finally had to flee. He performed miracles that defied the laws of nature, healing many, making food from scraps, making the paralyzed walk, making the blind to see, telling the winds even to quiet down, and they did. Even telling the dead to come back to life. Hallelujah. Jesus had crowds of people clamoring for just a touch from him, because everyone knew he has the power to make their life better. Oh, I think we're following a good guy. We want to be like Jesus. Yes, he had haters because he threatened the status quo. He threatened those who were in power and position. Not physically threatened. He didn't say anything to them, but they knew that his way of life was different than theirs, and he was telling people that there was a new and different, a better way. And so they didn't like him. But he showed the world the way to the Father, the way to the promise, the way to renewed and restored life of hope and blessing. That's what we're seeking. As we seek to cultivate lives of personal holiness, that's the series we're doing this season of Lent, Cultivating Personal Holiness. We want to know how to experience the blessing that Jesus had. We want to know how to experience this kind of connection, this kind of life. And those that are in the Bible study know we're going through this each week as we look through the disciplines that we see, spiritual disciplines, the practices we should put in our lives to be like Jesus. Of course, the pinnacle thing that makes this possible, the pinnacle thing that makes it even a possibility that we could be like Jesus, is because of something that only Jesus could do. Something that only Jesus did. And we will commemorate that next week during Holy Week, and I hope you will all be here for that. And we remember that Jesus willingly went to the cross to pay for our sins, because sin is what separates us from God, and once we get that separation fixed because Jesus paid for our sins, then we can begin to cultivate that personal holiness. When Jesus chose to give up his life so we could experience ours. Hallelujah. Thank you, Jesus. So that's where I'm coming at today. That's where I'm coming from today. I want to begin with recognizing who Jesus is, what Jesus has done, and why we should emulate and follow him. I know you're like, Pastor, we know all this. Why are you just reviewing all this basic stuff? Because we got to keep the basics in front of us. We have to know the basics. We have to start with the basics. And one of the things the thing we're going to talk about today is one of the basics. It's one of the, some would say the simplest maybe, discipline. Today, as we continue to learn about how Jesus lived, we learn about the practices in which he engaged so we can develop our personal holiness. We find that this basic, simple Sabbath is something we stumble over and often misunderstand. I say we stumble over it because in many of our churches, we misunderstand the concept. We misunderstand the day and its significance. We seem to only get half the story. And if there's time today, I'll tell you some of my story about that. But I feel reasonably assured that most people in our congregations, most people in our congregations would acknowledge that honoring the Sabbath is one of the 10 Commandments. Am I right? So you're all with me. This is easy, right? This is easy stuff. I venture to say maybe even most people in America would get that right. Well, maybe. Maybe. But as we acknowledge the Sabbath, the question really is, are we practicing the Sabbath? Are we celebrating it or just observing it, just watching it? Are we active in it? Are we practicing Sabbath? What is the Sabbath anyway? What does it mean? We understand the Sabbath was instituted way back before there were any other commandments or any rules at all to follow. Sabbath was instituted even before God gave the first rule to Adam and Eve, way back in Genesis chapter 2. And he didn't give the rules to the middle of the chapter, but after God had finished creating on the 6th day, when he got to the 7th day, he rested. Genesis 2, verse 3 says, "So God blessed the 7th day and hallowed it, because on it God rested from all the work that he had done in creation. This then became the Sabbath, the day of rest." That's what the Sabbath is. So I'm going to do something this morning that I regret I have to do, and I wish I didn't have to do this. I'm going to admit that I've been wrong. I know, right? Say it ain't so. You see, I believe that I've taught, perhaps even from this very pulpit, something in error. And so I need to publicly admit that because I don't want to have led anyone astray. Because I have taught for some time that the Hebrew word for seventh is the same as the Hebrew word for Sabbath. But it is not. In my studies for this preparation for this sermon, I realized that the words are very close, but I'm not real good in Hebrew. The Hebrew word for seven is shibi or shibi'ith, but the word for Sabbath is Shabbat or Shabboth. Not the same words. So I apologize to you. Forgive me for that. If you've heard that and been quoting it like I have quoted it, please forgive me. But the truth is, when God declared the seventh day, in the same couple verses, he then said on the seventh day, he declared it to be the day of rest. So although the words seventh and Sabbath are not the same, the seventh day is the day of rest. He said it's the seventh, and then he said it's the Sabbath. They're to be united with God. Because God rested on the seventh day, and God made it the day of rest. He made it holy, he hallowed it, and he blessed it. The Sabbath is a good thing. Later we know that, as we went through the Bible, we know that it was announced as a commandment in the law. Although he initially said it before he even told them, don't eat that fruit, he said this would be a day of rest. We know that when the law came down from Moses, the Sabbath was in it. Deuteronomy says it pretty clear, as Jen has already read, chapter 5, verses 12 through 14 in Deuteronomy says, observe the Sabbath day and keep it holy as the Lord your God commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter or your male or female slave or your ox or your donkey or any of your livestock or the resident aliens in your towns, so that your male and female slave may rest as well as you. That's what Moses gave to the people. This was commanded. I love the way it says this, because it's not just for the Jews, not just for the adults, it's even for the children. Children should say hallelujah. It's even for the resident aliens, for those who aren't Jewish, for anybody who's living there. Take the day off. Even for the servants, the slaves. And it says, get this, even for the donkeys. Even the donkeys get a day off. Hallelujah. I could make a joke that's crass. I'm not going to. But everyone and everything deserves rest. Everything deserves rest. As we look deeper into the Sabbath, we see that even the land was supposed to get 1 year off after 6 years of producing crops. God designed it so that everything deserves rest. Because, get this, rest is important to God. This is good news. This is a law we can get behind, right? We don't always like the laws, but this one, hallelujah, we're good with this. God commands us to take a day off. That should be simple. It should be easy. We should say, hallelujah, yes, thank you. But why did he have to command it? Because God knows people. He knows us. He knows how we work ourselves until we drop. How we drop with stress or with burnout. There's something to do, we should be doing it. We seem to think we can keep going even when we're on empty. We just need to work a few more hours, make a few more dollars, schedule that one more meeting, finish this project. I mean, nobody else is going to finish it, right? Let me just do this instead of resting until we collapse. That's how we are. We fill our schedules and we have that day that's supposed to be our day of rest, and somebody says, well, I really like to do something for me on this day. Well, I got this block of time here. Let me just put something in. Once we put it in, it's hard to take it out. Next thing you know, we're having that meeting every week. We're going to that practice, that ball game. We're doing something else, filling our schedule with everything and anything except time for ourselves and God. God said, no. Take the day. I demand it. If I have to, I will command it. 6 days is enough. Then rest. Fill up your 6 days if you wish. Go ahead, fill them up. But take 1 day to not do that stuff. It should be simple and easy, yet we mess it up and misunderstand it. And it's difficult because we have to be intentional about it. We can't just go about and say, well, I have that day coming up. We have to plan so that we don't have to do things on that day. We have to make sure we get everything in 6 days so we can have that day off. Not because it's a command, although it is, but because we need the rest. We need it. I used to tell the story about a lumberjack who had his axe, and every day he would go out there and chop trees down, and worked fine for a while, but eventually, you know what he had to do? He had to stop and rest, and he had to sharpen his axe. You can't keep using the same tool all the time if you don't stop to rest and help make it better. Sometimes that's what we keep chopping at life every day, chopping at life, and we never rest to sharpen ourselves. The Sabbath is a gift, not a curse. We see this misunderstanding was in Jesus' day as well. Jesus was accused several times of breaking the Sabbath. One such instance is recorded in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 2. We're going to look at that beginning in verse 23 and 24. Sorry. It says, one Sabbath he was going through the grain fields, and as they made their way, his disciples began to pluck heads of grain. The Pharisees said to him, "Look, why are they doing what is not lawful on the Sabbath?" So as we set the scene, we see Jesus and his disciples traveling on a Saturday. And they see some crops in the field and maybe a little hungry. They take a bite to eat. Seems harmless enough. They didn't have baskets to reap in someone else's field. They were not storing stuff for later. They weren't harvesting. They weren't doing any work, what would be considered work. It's just as though they were walking through an orchard and grabbed an apple off a tree. It's kind of like that. They're just moving like, hey, let me have a little something. I need a little sustenance, right? And yet the religious folk, the Pharisees, who were apparently watching their every move already, I mean, this is Mark chapter 2, still early on in the gospel, right away, they jump all over Jesus because they know he's the one leading them. Why are you letting your disciples do that stuff? Shouldn't you have taught them better? What's wrong with you? Look, they're breaking the Sabbath, doing this, what's not lawful, it said. Now, when I hear the story, my first thought is, why is it not lawful? What makes it illegal? It's not because they were working on the Sabbath. They weren't working. They weren't gathering in the fields. They were just walking and got hungry. I know a little bit about that. Nothing in the law prohibits that. But then I remember how the Pharisees like to construct laws to guard the other laws. They want to put protection against you breaking the law, so they'll add another law to keep the law that much further away from you actually breaking the law. Sounds silly, but we would never do that in America, would we? Make a silly law? Anyway. So they probably had a law that they had to fast on the Sabbath as well. I know it was the Jewish custom, especially the Pharisees, that they would fast every Sabbath to try to keep the day holy. I guess it makes sense. But as we discussed a few weeks ago, there is no biblical mandate to fast. The Bible does not say honor the Sabbath by fasting. It doesn't say that. So that's not a law directed by God. So it must have been a Jewish man-made law, a law that the Pharisees had chosen to impose upon people. They made the Sabbath restrictive. And to some extent, I get it. I mean, since the commandment was to honor the Sabbath and keep it holy, the Jews, in their attempt to try to create a culture of holiness, said we need to make sure people are understanding how to keep it holy. So we'll put barriers up so they can make sure they set the day apart. We'll make it a law that they have to fast. I mean, fasting, is a special thing, so that it'll definitely be different than other days. But God never said that. We often misunderstand the entire concept of holy. Holy means set apart for a special purpose. It differentiates it from the rest, from the mundane, from the ordinary. Of course, we recognize the holiness of God, as God is not ordinary. God is special. God is set apart. But to make the Sabbath holy is simply to not do on the Sabbath the things you do every other day, like work. Mostly, since that's exactly what God said. 6 days you shall labor, but on the seventh day you shall rest. Rest. The only thing you're not supposed to do on the Sabbath, according to God, is work. Just don't work. And that way you're setting the day apart. Honor God with it. Since you're not working, give God thanks for the day of rest. But eating, you can do that. You see, the Pharisees were honoring the Sabbath, but they were perverting it into something difficult instead of something easy. They were trying to set it apart for sure, but they were making it restrictive instead of freeing. God intended the Sabbath to be a good thing, not a hindrance, a blessing, not a curse. Jesus saw the issue. He knew what they were driving at, and he knew that these were Pharisees, these were biblical scholars, and so he gave them a biblical response which kind of comes out of left field, because his biblical response doesn't even include the word Sabbath in it. In verse 25 of Mark chapter 2, it says, "And he said to them, have you never read what David did when he and his companions were hungry and in need of food?" No doubt this answer caught them off guard. It kind of challenges them. These are biblical scholars. He's like, don't you know your Bible? That's kind of what he's saying. Have you not, you know this book, don't you? I mean, you read it from time to time, I'm sure. I'm sure you know the story about David, Jesus is saying. Now, the Pharisees probably weren't even considering the fact that these disciples were hungry and in need of food. They weren't considering the circumstances of what was going on in the disciples' life or Jesus' life. They were just simply looking for something to get them on. You ever know people like that? Let me just find a way to catch you. Yeah. And that's what they were doing. And so the first possibly questionable thing they did, the Pharisees were ready with the gotcha. But Jesus directs them to look at the situation differently. Jesus does that a lot, you know. He kind of changes our perspective. Helps us to see things in a way that maybe we're not used to seeing it. See things in a way that perhaps God sees it, which is not like man sees it. Because God looks at the heart. Man looks at the outside. So Jesus asked them to consider the need for food. That's why these disciples were taking these grains and eating them. And then he says, when you consider the need for food, consider what the great King David did. I mean, no one's going to, in the Jewish culture, no one's going to say David wasn't great. We know he had his problems, but he was still the man after God's own heart. So he continues in verse 26, telling the story, summing it up. He entered the house of God when Abiathar was high priest and ate the bread of the presence, which is not lawful for any but the priest to eat, and he gave some to his companions. Now Jesus is offering an extreme example to prove a point about holiness, about Sabbath, and about God. The story is actually from 1 Samuel 21. Abiathar was not the priest who was involved in the story, but he was the high priest at the time. David shows up at the tabernacle to beg for bread because he was hungry. Him and his companions, they'd been running from Saul. And he asked for regular bread. He asked the priest, I think it was Abiathar. No, not Abiathar, Abimelech, I think. He asked for regular bread. But the priest said, I don't have any regular bread. All I got's this holy bread. This bread set aside for holy purposes. All I got's this special stuff. It's reserved for the Sabbath. So although he doesn't mention the Sabbath, the bread was reserved for the Sabbath. And the bread was meant to just sit in the tabernacle on the day of the Sabbath, and then the priest would eat it as the day was over. But the priest, understanding what the Pharisees missed, he knew God's kindness and God's mercy. And so he gave this special consecrated bread to the hungry men instead of letting them starve or continue in hunger. Can you imagine if he had this bread there that was, God's not going to eat it, right? The bread's sitting there, but God's not going to eat it. He's like, I don't want you to eat it because it's set apart, special. You just go hungry. We're just going to let this food just sit there, but you go hungry. What would that say about God? You see, the law was purposeful to show the holiness of God, but if in doing so, God's people went away hungry, what would that say about God or about holiness? Does God not care for his people? Would God rather us keep the strictness of, in the Pharisees' case, a man-made law, or does God want to care for his people? So Jesus recognized the greater truth in that example and reframes the whole concept of Sabbath as well. But he continues in his response in verse 27, basically saying in the same way, listen to this in verse 27. Then he said to them, the Sabbath was made for humankind, and not humankind for the Sabbath. He declares the Sabbath was made for humanity as a gift, as a blessing, as something good. It's very different than thinking that we were made to honor the Sabbath, as though it's our duty to honor the Sabbath, to make the Sabbath holy, as though that we miss the point of the Sabbath is holy as a gift to us. You see, honoring the Sabbath is something we are to do, but not because we are enslaved by it or to it, but because the Sabbath frees us. The Sabbath frees us to rest, frees us to enjoy, frees us to take the day off from our mundane so we can celebrate God's gift. The Sabbath, this is where the misunderstanding truly comes. When we make the Sabbath so regimented, so legalistic, that we miss the joy that the Sabbath is meant to have. Remember when the 10 Commandments were given? Sometimes we kind of gloss over this. But the 10 Commandments were given when the Israelites, who were slaves in Egypt, were set free. After they get free from their slavery, Moses goes up to the mountain and gets the 10 Commandments. He gets these rules and these laws because the slaves are no longer subject to the Egyptian laws, but they have to know how to live. So these 10 Commandments are, in my opinion, rules for living free. This is how we are to enjoy freedom, if we can honor these 10 Commandments. If we can live by these 10 Commandments, we will see this is the goodness that God wants us to have. And in the Deuteronomy passage that we read, the next verse about Sabbath reminds them of this very fact. For it says in Deuteronomy 5:15, after he says, honor the Sabbath and keep it holy, and he says, remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt. And the Lord your God brought you out from there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day. You were slaves, and now you're free. The Sabbath is intended to give us freedom. That's why, you think most cultures, slaves work how many days of the week? 7. They don't get a day off. But when God gave the Sabbath, did he give the slaves a day off? Yes. Even the donkeys got the day off. There's your joke again. You can put it in. God wants us to be free, not in bondage. And yet the Pharisees were using the Sabbath to keep people in bondage. They were using the Sabbath as an attempt to trap people. How could you not be honoring the Sabbath? They're keeping enslaved by the legalism, by the rituals. They misunderstood and misused God's blessing. I used to misunderstand the Sabbath as well. Of course, we know this is going to be in the chapter in your Bible study, but the Sabbath was supposed to be Friday night or Friday dusk to Saturday dusk. But as a Christian, I always believed it's Sunday. The Bible never says that. That'd be the first day of the week. But I used to be so enslaved by it that of course, I refused to work on the Sabbath on Sunday. I even lost a job because I told them I'm not going to work on Sunday. When I applied for it, I said, can't work on Sunday. They said, well, you can't work here if you don't work on Sunday. I said, I'll apply somewhere else. But I remember I used to have to drive 45 minutes to get to church. And I used to go out Saturday night, buy my Sunday paper on Saturday night, because I used to read the paper back when it was a thing. Fill up my gas tank on Sunday night, and get any food that I thought I was going to need on Sunday night, or Saturday night, so that I could have all day Sunday without having to make anybody else work either. That was my thought. I needed to make sure that I kept the Sabbath holy, and not just for me, but for everybody. I didn't want anyone to have to work. And then there came a time when I had kids, and my wife and I needed to travel to visit her family, and it was on a Sunday. It was an emergency situation. We had to travel, and it wasn't just the normal fill up your gas tank once kind of travel. And I found I had to either say, we can't go visit your dad in the hospital, or maybe I can relax this a little bit. You see, I made the law so ritual, so legalistic, that I was going to undermine the love and care for my family. That's not the intention. Intention is supposed to be freedom, not enslavement. I was enslaved to the day instead of freed by it. Hallelujah, I began to understand it differently. I began to understand the Sabbath is intended to give us freedom, not bondage. The Pharisees were still enslaved by it, and they were trying to enslave everybody else by it. Matter of fact, they used to have a law that the Pharisees had that on the Sabbath, you could only go 1 mile from your house, and no more other than that was considered work. And so what the Jews would try to do, anything that was the part of their property was considered their house. So they would take a chair and go 1 mile from their house on the day before the Sabbath and put the chair there so that the next day they could go 2 miles. See, the Sabbath is not supposed to be bondage. It's supposed to be freedom. Take the day off. Take time to rest. Just enjoy God. Jesus restores the Sabbath as a good thing. He tries to teach the Pharisees. After all, Jesus is Lord of the Sabbath. Verse 28 says that. As we close with this, verse 28, so the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. Jesus was not going to be cornered by the Pharisees. He understood the Sabbath was to make life better, not make life harder. To let us live with freedom, not live in bondage. So as we strive to be like Jesus, be intentional about your 6 days of work, and work hard and work well and plan it and do it all as you should, but then take your Sabbath. Make it holy. Set it apart from regular work. Enjoy the time of rest and celebrate the God who gave it to you and the Jesus who is Lord of it. Amen. Amen. Let's pray. Dear Lord Jesus, we thank you for the Sabbath. We thank you for the time to rest. We thank you for the time to just relax and enjoy that you gave us rest. You gave us the ability to work and the opportunity to rest. We pray that you would be with each one here, that as their schedules are cluttered, as their calendars are full, that they would recognize the gift of Sabbath and rearrange stuff so they could truly enjoy the time to sharpen their axe, the time to rest and celebrate you. We pray that you would continue to be with each of us. And if anyone here hasn't experienced the joy of salvation, that today would be the day as we partake of this communion in just a few moments, that you would be able to truly meet with us here at this table, that we would be able to enjoy rest with you today, that we could truly experience all that you've given us as you've given your life so that we might have ours. We thank you and praise you. In Jesus' name, amen.